There's an argument to be made that American theater was really born, the American voice of the playwright was born with Eugene O'Neill and Ben Hecht and The Front Page and the plays of Eugene O'Neill in the teens and the 20s, that the voice of the American playwright began then and the group theater began then. In Canada, that didn't happen until I was a young man. That didn't happen until the late 60s, because all our theater was American and British. I'm not talking about French Canadian theater that has its own identity and its own much faster and much more vibrant birth. But the Canadian theater birth, there were Canadian playwrights, but very few and far between, writing with original Canadian voices. My generation, coming into their early 20s, were unable to get jobs, really. Oh, there was the odd play. I was a member of the Stratford Company when I was 20, and they did the odd Canadian play, very odd and very rarely. But those of us that couldn't get jobs in the theater or in television created our own theaters. In Toronto, it happened in Toronto, it happened in Winnipeg, it happened in Vancouver, it happened in Halifax. It happened in every major Canadian English-speaking city. It was already, as I say, going on in Montreal. But it certainly just started then. And one of the reasons it started was because of another Trudeau, Justin's dad. Because Pierre Elliott Trudeau was elected in 67 or 68, and that government created an opportunities for youth program, and it created a number of programs for the arts, and gave the funding for all these art centers to be built, including the National Arts Centre in Ottawa. The Americans that had been draft dodgers in Canada, what this has to do with Yiddishkeit, I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but it has to do with community and it has to do with language. The Americans who were draft dodgers and deserters had a much better understanding of political action than Canadians did. The Canadian attitude towards politics and citizenship was one of cooperation, compromise, and being a good citizen. The American attitude, certainly by the ones who were draft dodgers and deserters, were political activism and individual rights. It was the Americans who taught us how to politicize our needs, gather together a voice, and tell the Canadian government that they should never build any art center in this country without also commissioning original Canadian playwrights' work, Canadian authors' work, Canadian composers' work, Canadian choreographers' work. That happened because of, to a large extent, because of American draft dodgers and draft deserters activism. We got maybe an untold story. There's a huge effect of the Vietnam War was the birth of Canadian theater. And it was because we were getting the cream of the crop. We were getting all these very socially conscious activists who were helping be responsible for free clinics and for many, many aspects of left-wing Canadian rights that were left-wing Canadian activities that were going on that we were fighting for politically. And one of the offshoots of that were the theaters that I helped found, that I became a part of or a founding member of. And these theaters, one of the main things that they did was, for the first time ever, new Canadian plays. So in many ways, what was going on in my father's generation in the 1920s and teens, and by the time it was the 1930s for him, when already Yiddish theater was already starting to have a voice before the Holocaust destroyed all that, or tried to. In many ways, that's what happened to me accidentally. I don't think I was influenced by my dad having done it. Where you find the common denominator is not because I saw my father do it. It's the search for community. It's the search for belonging. It's the search for having a voice. It's the search for being able to tell your audience in their own language. It's a very interesting thing that happened to me. I directed a film that was produced by Dustin Hoffman's company, a movie called Clubland I directed for Showtime and Paramount. About in the year 2000 or so. And one of the people that was in Dustin's company was a great American playwright called Murray Schisgel, who was his dramaturge, who was responsible for helping to develop the scripts and make them better and all that. And I got to meet Murray who was a hero of mine. And I said, you know, Murray, it's a great story actually about this subject. I said, you know, one of your plays actually changed my life. He said, one of my plays changed your life. I said, yeah, when I was 14. He said, what do you mean? I said, you know, you wrote a play called Love, L-U-V. It starred Ann Jackson and Eli Wallach and Alan Arkin. And I saw it on Broadway with my parents, who had relatives in New York, and they took me to see this play. It was a big hit. This is a play about middle-class Jews in Long Island. How could a 14-year-old be affected by it? I said, well, I have to admit, it wasn't the play that really changed my life. It was the intermission. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, it was a revelation to me. I had already been in theater for 6, 7 years by that point, doing a lot of different plays. You know, children's theater, Peter Pan, and, you know, American plays, or playing a young king in Shaw's Cleopatra, or whatever the hell I was doing as a child actor on stage. But in the intermission, he said, yeah, all the people in the lobby getting drinks spoke exactly the same as the people on stage. Yeah. I said, well, I'd never seen that. Never were the people on stage speaking the same language as the people in the lobby. It changed my life. And I realized that that was possible, which is why Shalom Aleichem exists.